And I think we're live.
I can't see myself. Oh yeah, I do. So this is what the screen's going to look like. Ah, there I am. Are we live?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, I wanted to start this chat by remembering and honoring and expressing my gratitude to the people who made it possible for me to have the life that I wanted to have. The life that I wanted to have was a musician's life. So I mentioned in the other chat that I gave, which was in late May, that a peculiar set of circumstances landed me at age 22 or 23 as a very undeveloped amateur. And the peculiar set of circumstances were I went to live in Morocco when I was 12. I actually took my first cello lesson with a wonderful young teacher named David Wells. He was very young at the time. But a year and a half later, I'm not going to go into the whole story why, but I ended up living in Casablanca, Morocco for 5 years. And during that period, when other young people like me, because I had been living in New York, were taking lessons, we're playing in youth orchestras, we're playing chamber music, we're going to summer festivals, we're attending concerts. All I was doing was watching the locusts fly in from the Sahara Desert. We live in Casablanca, right on the sea. By the way, if you've never been in a locust storm, you have no idea. The sky turns black. Anyway, so I don't want to say I lost those years. They were interesting years. And then I came back I wanted to stop playing. My father bought an inexpensive cello. There were French cellists who had ended up in Morocco during World War II, escaping from the Vichy regime in France, the Nazi regime, um, collaborationist regime. So I had some lessons, but I had no friends who played instruments. There was no concerts. All I had were records. Anyway, came back to the States, and it was obviously impossible for me to become a music major. Went all the way through Brandeis, studying something else. I went to Harvard as a graduate student, and then I dropped out because I wanted to try to become a cellist. Now I'm getting to the story I want to tell. Around age 23, after I had dropped out of Harvard, I was stuck. I was so tight when I played. And I had had very nice teachers. They did not know how to help me. And obviously, I needed assistance. Well, I fell into the hands of Janos Starker. Janos Starker needs no introduction from me. He wrote a book called The World of Music, according to Janos Starker. There are tons of interviews with him, performances. By the way, if you want to see something astonishing, you must watch him play the Kodai Sonata. And I think he was around age 70. So you can get to know Janos Starker if you did not know him personally. There are lots of ways online, tons of interviews and performances. But anyway, why was Mr. Starker so important in my life? The idea behind Mr. Starker's teaching was to help people do things that they were unable to do before. And I did not know how to use myself in relation to the cello. You have an idea, music, but it has to pass through your body, then get into cello, and get out as in the form of sound. I was so tight I couldn't do that. So what were the principles of his teaching? First of all, the simplest one was sitting in a balanced way. Right now, the chair is holding up my torso, and the floor is supporting my legs. My body, there are no muscle groups contracted in my body at all. If I lean forward, I have to contract muscles this way, this way, this way. If I don't contract some muscles, I'm going to fall over. The first principle was to sit in a balanced way, and you can act from there. You're free to act. There are no muscle groups contracted that you don't need to use. Now, the two big concepts. The first is circles. What did he mean by that? Music is continuous. So our gestures, if we're going to give the illusion, the sense that the music actually is continuous, our gestures need to be of the same form. The circle is a continuous form. Now, how did he teach that? With the bow, I'll first show you without playing. With the idea in the bow was this, that's very exaggerated, and the idea in the left hand was this, so that everything was constantly flowing with no tension in the shoulders and energy coming from the back. So just showing you very briefly. With the bow, you see me making a circle, and so circles mean that each new gesture is prepared. I'm not doing that. I'm doing now. I think is a fairly common principle. Other teachers teach it also. The way Mr. Starker taught it was basically this kind of a circle. So going from one string to another, going from a lower to a higher string to a lower string. Okay, so circles, continuous motion. How did that work for the left hand? Well, it's the same idea. We don't want to make a shift like that. So I'm demonstrating it very, very exaggerated. Very exaggerated, this. So the idea is you're sitting in a balanced way and everything is moving freely. Every gesture is anticipated. So this and these kinds of things. Now, I'd have to show you in a lesson, a more sophisticated presentation, but that's the basic idea. But here's the big idea. And the biggest idea that allowed me to begin to start playing well. And it is the idea of alternation of tension and relaxation. What did he mean? Well, let me do the bow first. So, at the frog, the energy from your back is flowing directly into the strings. But what about out here? Well, that's what the bow is for. The bow is just a tool to set the string in vibration. So my hand looks like this at the frog, and it looks like that at the tip. And as I go out to the frog, if I want to equalize the sound, slowly, you see my hand turning, and I'm starting to exert pressure, just enough pressure that the sound is even. Now, the maximum point of work that I'm doing in my right hand and arm is here. And when I come back, it all relaxes. So the point is, my hand and my arm do not feel the same at any point during the bow stroke. It is changing constantly, always changing from relaxation to tension, from tension to relaxation. The effect is you don't get tired. When I went to study with him, I was grabbing the bow. I was squeezing. I had a big black callus on the tip of my thumb. Well, that disappeared very quickly. So where the bow is concerned, unless if you're staying in the same part of the bow, like that, well, then your hand is going to be in the same position. But during the stroke, I go from very relaxed to somewhat more tense with this pronating movement, and then back to the frog, and my hand it never feels the same. It's always changing from more tension to less tension and back, and so on and so forth. Now, left hand. So, what he taught was that the only energy, the only tension in the left hand is in the finger that is playing. So, when I put my second finger, right now there is playing tension in my first finger to press the string down. When I put my second finger down, my first finger relaxes. When I put my third finger down, the other two fingers are relaxed, and the same with the fourth finger. What happens is there is never any tension in my left hand except in the finger that is actually working. And the result of that also, I spent a lifetime working on this. And by the way, the things I'm showing you very briefly, I have to look for them every day. It's not like they're just there and I can find them immediately. I have to search for them because it's not so easy to integrate these things into one's playing. But the effect of each finger to some extent being an independent actor and the other fingers not working together with it unless you're playing a double step, is that the left hand is always free. And this is also, it's the same thing. It's an alternation of tension and relaxation. My first finger was working and now it's relaxing. Nothing remains either in a constant state of tension or a constant state of relaxation. Constant state of tension means you can't do anything. Constant state of relaxation, because you're so tight, constant state of relaxation obviously also means you can't do anything. I want to say a word about Mr. Starker as a player. By the way, this was a brilliant guy. occasionally you meet somebody and you realize, let me just turn this thing on in case I get some questions. Just one second here. Oh, come on. Just one second. Okay, good. Oh, goodness. I already have a question from Daniel Sperry. Daniel, could you wait just a moment? I'm not quite finished. Okay, I tell you what. I need to move on. Many of you will not know the name Mihai Virizlay. Mihai Virizlay was also from Hungary. Daniel, forgive me, okay? And what I was told was that Mr. Starker, at age 10, gave Mr. Virizlay at age 5 his first lesson. Virizlay was a fantastic cellist. He played very much in the style of Mr. Starker. He was a virtuoso, free, warm, beautiful sound. Of course, he had a completely different personality from Mr. Starker. Anyway, I'll say this quickly. I only studied 1 year with Mr. Starker. I had to go into the Army. And fortunately, I was in the Army band for 3 years in Washington. Mr. Virizlay, who I had met during the summers in Bloomington, taught at Peabody. And he was an ally of Mr. Starker. It was the same system. So I had learned the basic system from Mr. Starker, and with Mr. Virizlay, I went on to learn more repertoire. He was also, oh, listen, I have to tell you, this was a very creative guy. On YouTube, you will find Mr. Virizlay playing a performance of his own cello concerto with the Baltimore Symphony. He also painted. He was a very, very gifted person. Mr. Virizlay prepared me for the Cleveland Orchestra audition that I won. We studied all the excerpts. We studied them like real pieces. That's the way they should be studied, by the way. They are real music. And I went and won my first audition. Mr. Virizlay, I owe him an enormous debt of gratitude. And finally, I have to mention Gregor Piatigorsky. So I played 2 years in the Cleveland Orchestra, but I mean, I had spent 2.5 years in music schools. That was it. And I was unhappy with the way I played. I knew I needed to study some more. I was not going to improve sitting in the Cleveland Orchestra. And Lynn Harrow was the principal cellist. He inspired me also to want to play better. So I went to Los Angeles for a year, and I studied with Piatigorsky. Well, that was, he was one of the greats. A wonderful man. We didn't have lessons. There were 2 master classes a week, which were very, very hard for me. Sometimes I think it was Thursday morning and Sunday morning, showed up at 9. Sometimes you sat for 4 hours. And they said, Michael, play whatever it was. Well, you could imagine. I mean, I was terrified. And so I have 2 anecdotes I want to tell. Piatigorsky also, you can find lots of performances. Find him playing the Walton Cello Concerto on YouTube. It'll blow your mind, believe me. Anyway, so it was very hard for me. I sort of got used to it. Anyway, one day in the class, I had sat there for 4 hours, cold, hungry, terrified, bored. Michael played the Rococo variations or whatever it was. Well, whatever I played, it was one of the days I didn't play well. And I went up to him. He sat at a little table. He was a very handsome, elegant guy with a double-breasted suit and a cigarette holder. And I said very quietly, Mr. Piatigorsky, I lose all my self-confidence when I get in here. And he said to me very quietly, I've struggled with that my entire life. Can you imagine what that meant to me? I was 28 or 29. How was I to know that Gregor Piatigorsky, one of the great that he too had suffered and struggled with the same kinds of things that I was up against? It was an enormous gift that he gave me. He said it so quietly, I was the only person who heard it. And one more anecdote about him. He said in a class, I don't remember the context, he said, every mistake you have made and every mistake you will make, I made it before you. This is humility. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful cellist. He coached us, and to play for a great artist like that, well, anyway, I think I need to move on a little bit, but those 3 guys, Mr. Starker, Mihai Virizlay, and Gregor Piatigorsky, they were the ones, because I started, I'm repeating myself, I started seriously when I was 22 or 23. They were the ones who allowed me to have the life I wanted. I wanted to be a professional musician and wake up every day and work on becoming a better musician. And that's exactly the life that I've had. Now, okay, Starker talked about the importance of relaxing, ease of motion while playing. Are there any particular specific suggestions you have or that you gleaned from him for, well, yes, Daniel, I talked about that. First of all, okay, ease of, okay, the idea of circular motions, which are continuous, and which make everything flow, because the music flows, so our gestures have to flow. And the other thing that maybe you tuned in after I talked about it, the alternation of tension and relaxation, where the hand and the bow, it's very relaxed here, and to equalize the sound, more tense here. And as you draw the stroke, the hand becomes more tense. As you go back, it returns to a point of relaxation. My hand does not feel the same at any point in a legato bow stroke. And as a result, I don't get tired, because it's always alternating between more relaxation and more tension, and alternating between the two. And with my left hand, only the finger that I'm playing with actually is doing any work. The others are at rest, and as each finger comes down, the others begin to relax. Okay. Christian Strandberg, could listen to stories all day. Thanks, Maestro. Best from Berlin. Oh, thank you. You know, I see there are no more questions right now. I have to mention a few people. Richard Kapuscinski was the man who gave me my first chance. I met him in Boston. He was in the Boston Symphony. He went to Curtis. He had been principal cellist of the Baltimore Symphony, assistant principal in Cleveland, the cellist of the LaSalle Quartet, Boston Symphony. He taught at Oberlin for many years. And when I was at Harvard, I took lessons with him. And he got me a scholarship at the New England Conservatory. And that was my chance to begin studying. He was a cheerful, warm guy. He was full of enthusiasm for music. And Mr. Kapuscinski, thank you. You gave me a chance. I dropped out of Harvard to go to study with you at the New England Conservatory. Thank you. Now, Joseph Gingold. Let me see, am I missing any? How did your teacher? Okay, wait a sec. Here we go. Jonas Chen. Hi, Michael. How did your teacher's teaching style differ, and how have they influenced your own? Thank you. I'd like to think I've absorbed something from all of them. I mean, the whole idea of studying with a bunch of people, one teacher is rarely enough for any of us, because, you know, I'm thinking I would have liked to have been a good teacher for everybody who studied with me. It wasn't possible. You know, I was able to help some people, and for some people, my approach did not work, or my personality didn't work, or something didn't. So, how? First of all, Mr. Starker's basic approach, Mr. Starker didn't expect people to play like him, to imitate him. He wanted us to find a way to play with fewer obstacles of getting tense, or getting out of balance, or squeezing, or that kind of thing. So that has been a big part of how I've taught everybody who came to me, to find a way with a balanced seating and freedom of motion and the alternation of tension and relaxation to make the playing freer. Mr. Virizlay, it was exactly the same thing. Those two guys, that's how I got into the Cleveland Orchestra, because I made enough progress playing from using a system of great freedom and accuracy, and an intelligent system where I knew what I was doing. Before I went to Mr. Starker, nobody had told me, this is how you do it. This is how you use your body. This is how the body functions most effectively and efficiently. Now, of course, Gregor Piatigorsky was, you know, a huge personality as a man, as a player. And, you know, of course, that influenced me too. Hearing Lynn Harrell play when we were in the orchestra together. So the answer to your question is, I hope I've absorbed everything that was offered to me, made it my own in my own way, and gone on to offer it to others. Hi, nice to see you. Oh, hi, Martha. Okay, Maestro. Don't call me Maestro. That's a term of abuse where I come from. That was a joke. I'm sorry. I'm a great teaser. Don't take me too seriously. Maestro, I would like to ask that you, any suggestions for shifting with relaxing into the high positions? Brahms cellist, well, you know what? If you think I'm going to play that shift for you now, you're nuts. You know, I'm not prepared to play it. But what I told you, what I showed you, it is the preparation. It is. Okay. Look at my arm. Whoopsie. Okay, I said I wouldn't play it, and I did. I am preparing the shift. Here, a bad shift is this. Look, see what I'm doing? I wonder if, I hope that helped you. But you know what? Oh, wait, I have something else to say. Mr. Starker has a book called An Organized Method of String Playing. In that book, he has a whole series of shifting exercises. Now, listen, I wasn't planning to perform for anybody today, but he has, the way he suggests learning to shift is to shift from one position to another. So this is, that's one position, that's another. So he would have taken all the notes you can play in this position and practice shifting to all the notes in the next position. So that when you moved your hand, you were not just hunting for one note at a time, but changing, going to an entirely new position on the cello. I'd have to tell you, and I've used Mr. Starker's book my entire life. I still do some of the exercises. It is very effective, very brainy. You don't have to do more than 10, 15 minutes a day if you find it interesting. But he has shifting exercises in there. But the key answer to your question is to prepare so that it looks like that. I don't know if that was in two, and I'm not going to find out. Okay, okay. I wish you could Suen. Well, I wonder if that helps you. Forgive me. I did not practice the Brahms F major sonata this morning, and you know, I'm just going to miss it again. Okay, I don't have another question yet. Well, let me go on. Oh, Joseph Gingold. Talk about somebody who influenced me. He, along with Ivan Galamian and Dorothy DeLay, these were the most famous violin teachers, and he was on the faculty at Indiana when I was a student there. This is also someone, and he died many years ago. Those of you who did not know him, please. There are lots of things on YouTube. Interviews with Gingold, with his students. He studied with Eugene Izai, and from him came a tradition of playing of warmth and nuance and beauty. I'll give you an example. Oh, okay, wait a minute. I'll give you an example another time. Okay. Thought of a question as a performer. Did you have to struggle a bit with being confident in yourself among your incredible peers? Sometimes I have trouble shedding my emotion. You bet I struggled. But you know, the thing is, look, okay, in the Piatigorsky class, the room was full of great cellists. There was Nathaniel Rosen, who won the Tchaikovsky competition. Jeff Solo. Paul Tobias stopped by sometime. Dennis Brott. Gottfried Hochgewein, who was the principal cellist of the Concertgebouw Orchestra. Emanuel Gruber. Terry King, who wrote Piatigorsky's biography. Larry Lesser stopped by sometimes. The answer to your question is yes and no. My life was not going to, their lives were not going to interfere with mine. I was trying to learn to play well. I wasn't competing with them. And so, yes, I mean, when I dropped out of Harvard and went to music school, I was so far behind everybody else. It was a joke. And if I had felt, oh my God, I'm no good, I'm never going to be any good, everybody's better than I am, I never would have done this. I didn't care. I had something I wanted desperately to learn to do, and to try to learn to do it well. And nobody was going to stop me from that. That was a personal quest of mine. What everybody else did was their business. But an even better answer is I learned from all of my colleagues. Many people. Oh, I'm thinking of so many people along the way. Colleagues, Robert Gardner, for example, Ed Lout, David Sepisi, lots of people with whom I was in school, Nella Hunkins, lots of people with whom I was in school, people with whom I worked later, wonderful, wonderful cellists. I didn't envy them or compete with them. I said, how do you do that? And I think that's the way to do it. Anyway, struggle about being confident. Look, everybody has gifts and talents. There are certain things in my life that I do not doubt myself about. but the cello was not something that I had a big natural gift for. I had to contend with that my entire life. And look, Piatigorsky said to me, he struggled his whole life with self-confidence. So I think that's the best answer I can give you. My impression has been nobody in the world does not suffer from, and whoops, oh, this thing went off, just 1 second. Sorry, okay, just 1 second. I don't know why it's doing that. Whoops. Okay. All right, here we go. So I'm still on Christians. No, I think everybody struggles with that. So let's see, who else would I like to mention? Oh, well, I have to say, you know, I have played with and heard great pianists. I've played with great conductors. You know, one of the wonderful things about playing in a great orchestra, the Cleveland Orchestra is a great orchestra, you know, you get to play the entire repertoire. I mean, over my career, I played in an orchestra, I was a freelancer in New York, I played in a string quartet, I had a trio for many years with a wonderful violinist named Jamie Buswell, and a pianist named Seth Carlin, who's no longer alive, unfortunately. So the thing is, when you play a stringed instrument, you get to do it all. I played opera, ballet, symphonies, chamber music, solo repertoire, concertos, and as I went through those experiences, people made very, very deep impressions on me. I mean, let's see. Okay, here we go. Janos Starker. Would you mind going more into what it was like playing with Lynn Harrell? Well, he was a very sweet guy. he was, you know, he was not the kind of principal cellist who turned around all the time and told you what bowing to use, or you know, made sure we were behaving ourselves. Not once. He was a kind, sweet. I mean, mind you, I'm talking about he's 25 and I'm 27. He was a wonderful cellist. He played rather differently then from the way he played when he made his solo career. It was the most pure, simple, beautiful, elegant, beautiful sounding cello playing you can imagine, without any exaggeration at all. And we were all in awe of him. But I mean, that's all I can say. I think I mentioned in the other CelloChat that I did, first time I heard Lynn play a solo, when I joined the orchestra, I mean, my mouth fell open. It was so beautiful. I went and asked him for lessons, but you know, he didn't really know how to help me at that point. But I was always friendly with him. I saw him many times over the years. In fact, we sat together once on the same stand in the Colorado Music Festival Orchestra. I was the principal, but Lynn asked, could he be the principal? Was I going to say no? Of course not. I hope that answers your question. Okay, any more questions here? Well, let's see. Who else? Oh, guess what? The Cleveland Quartet. The Cleveland Quartet was founded the same day I joined the Cleveland Orchestra, September 1969. Paul and Martha, Don Weilerstein, Peter Saloff, and I went to all their concerts. I heard their Beethoven Quartet series twice in New York, and Paul was ahead of me as a cellist, and Paul helped me. And I'll tell you how, the major way he helped me. I had only a very light, lyrical way of playing, and Paul recognized that if I was going to make myself heard, and by the way, Robert Gardner was another big influence on me in this way, I was going to have to learn how to relax into the cello. That is actually a phrase that Jamie Buswell used when we played. Michael, relax into the cello, because I kind of was a little bit above. And by relaxing into the cello, having more weight flow all the way from my back into the cello without squeezing. By the way, on this, anybody else? Could you, this loosening stiff bow holds. Oh, okay. Yes, yes I can. Sure, I can try. Do you know what the bow weighs? It weighs 3 ounces. Did you hear that? 3 ounces. And yet you see people holding it like it's a baseball bat, which by the way also you can't squeeze. Okay, so I think one of the things I said was that the difference between holding the bow with the frog when the hand is basically, the energy is basically flowing directly into the string, you don't have to, you hardly have to hold the bow at all. You have to make sure you don't drop it. This is very different. And along the way, like I said, the level of intensity in my hand changes. But let's see, what did I learn? I mean, I think I basically learned to hold the bow basically, to start out with the forefinger, the pinky, and the thumb, add the other fingers. One thing, oh yeah. No, so I remember something I picked up from some book, might have been Playing the String Game by Phyllis Young. And she suggested having a student pretend that they are holding a very, very ripe strawberry, a great big ripe strawberry in their right hand. What, you're not going to squeeze it, you'll have a pulpy mess. But there's this light level of tension in the hand because you don't want to drop it. Then turning your hand over and putting it on the bow. Oh, that feels great. And I can play. So, but the key thing to understand is, at least I think, that while the hand is very relaxed at the frog, because the transmission of energy is directly into the cello, as you go farther away from the frog, you have to start using a pronating motion, a rotating motion in your hand, because otherwise, if I just keep doing that, the sound will not be equalized. So I think this business of hold the bow with your left hand, pretend you're holding another idea was to balance a tennis ball on your fingertips. Very light level of contraction. Turn your hand around, put it on. That is a very, very nice feeling. I hope that was helpful. Exercice pour le vibrato. Ah bon, mademoiselle Limondin, je parle français. J'ai passé ma jeunesse au Maroc, alors à l'âge de 16 ans, je parlais le français aussi bien que ma langue à moi. Malheureusement, j'ai jamais l'occasion de parler, mais c'est un grand plaisir d'avoir l'occasion au moins de parler quelques mots en français. Bon, okay. Exercises for vibrato. Let me tell you how I learned vibrato. I was so tight. I couldn't vibrate. I mean, you have no idea what Mr. Starker did for me. At age 23, anybody who knew me said, oh, Michael's going to become a professional cellist. By the way, I didn't mind. That's what I thought too. But here's how I learned vibrato. It's not the only way, but it helped me. Mr. Starker had me move my hand up and down the fingerboard with my hand at this angle. Then he had me, let's say the second finger, stop and root my second finger in the string, but keep the motion. Because the vibrato motion comes from the arm. So the first thing I had to learn was that the way I learned it, the vibrato motion comes from the arm itself. Now, to get the speed up, I remember, because I couldn't vibrate, I remember setting a metronome at 60, click, 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 2, click, 2. Click, 2, 3, click, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so finally, I ended up with a good vibrato. But that is one of the, first, the motion itself, which is from the forearm, letting the finger, letting a second, it doesn't matter on the note, letting the finger, the tip of the finger, the flesh of the finger, stop and root itself in the string and keep that motion going like that. And out of that comes a vibrato. At least that's how I vibrate. I hope that was helpful. By the way, Marie-Hélène, tell me if it wasn't helpful. Just write another question. I remember another exercise that Mr. Starker gave me. He said that the hand can be connected to the forearm in two different ways. Tightly and loosely. So he had us do an exercise. Now the connection is very loose, so that you went from a very free connection between the arm and the fingers to an intense one. So that was another exercise that helped me. Hello, adult beginner here, cello 35. I absolutely love the cello. Hard time with dynamics. Do you have a way to explain how to do this? Well, yes. You make a soft, yes. It's a question of how much energy you put into the cello. I mean, it's a sophisticated question because how much volume you make, it comes entirely from the bow. So we're really talking about discussing how to use the bow. But basically, if you press very lightly, you get a soft tone. The more energy you pass all the way from your back, through your arm, through your fingers, through the bow, and into the string, then you get more sound. That's a very sophisticated question that you're asking, and the broader answer is that you need help with how to use with your bow, because I can do anything I want with my left hand. There's no sound. The sound comes from here, and basically the amount of sound that comes out of the cello is proportional to the amount of energy you put into it from the bow. I hope that was helpful. Okay. By the way, I'm looking at these questions. If the answers aren't good, just tell me. Who else would I like to mention? Well, David Wells. He was my first cello teacher when I was 10 and a half. He and then Lauren Bernstone. David Wells went on to a long career teaching at Hart, the New England Conservatory, where else? Manhattan School of Music. I met him, he was a charming young guy. Many years later, I taught at his summer festival, Yellow Barn, and then Lauren Bernstone, who later was a member of the New York Philharmonic. These are the two guys who started me on the cello. But then I went to live in Morocco. Then there was this long dead period. Let's see. You bet. Oh my God, Bill Schultz. Oh my God, Bill Schultz. Oh, how I admired you. You were my ideal. You sounded so beautiful. You could do everything that I had no idea how to do. Not the vaguest, and I liked you too. How nice to hear from you. Listen, here's another guy, Bill Schultz, who, here was a guy, let's see, I was 21. This is the first time I had ever had a chance to pretend I was a cellist. And I was going to go to Harvard after that summer. And here was this guy, my age, studying with David Wells. Everything he did sounded fantastic. And I think I was too shy to ask him, or at least I wasn't even smart enough to ask him. But do I remember you? You were unbelievable. And I admired you. I think I bumped into you one more time with your little daughter at Marlboro. I lost track of you. It's very nice to hear from you. I want you to know how much I admired and liked you. Lovely chat. Yes. Okay. So after Morocco, my father worked for an international welfare organization. He was transferred to Geneva. In Geneva, I took lessons with a lovely guy named Roger Levengut. Roger Levengut was the assistant principal cellist of the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande, and later was the cellist of the Levengut Quartet with his brother. What was his brother's name? Alfred Levengut, I think. Anyway, so there I did have lessons, but I was going to the International School in Geneva, the École Internationale. But the cello was a sideline, and I didn't play well. I had just had 4 years in Morocco. I didn't get very far. Then, okay, let's see. Okay, so then I came back to the States, and I went to Brandeis University for 4 years. At Brandeis, there was one of Pablo Casals' best-known students, Madeline Foley. I don't want to say this against Madeline Foley, but teaching a guy like me, I didn't play very well. I was eager, but that's all I could say about myself. So somehow that didn't work. And it was then that I met Richard Kapuscinski. So one of the other cellists at Brandeis was studying with him and liked him. And so this was a guy I knew for many years. And what I'd like to say about him, he was brimming with love for music and the energy that it gave him and the pleasure it gave him. Oh, I have to mention somebody else from my Brandeis years, violinist Robert Koff. Robert Koff had been the original second violinist in the Juilliard Quartet when it was formed. And he was a professor of music at Brandeis. And I remember I went to one of his lectures, and I was 17 or 18. And this also was a man. These guys, they made me want to be a musician because I saw the energy and the joy and the pleasure that it gave them to talk about it, to do it. And I felt that inside myself. The problem was that I couldn't play. And I had to, at some point, whoops, the screen is going dark. I had to move on and learn. So I learned how to play. So then, like I said, I went to Harvard, I dropped out, I went to the New England Conservatory. By the way, the New England Conservatory was nothing like the school it is now. There were just enough string students for one orchestra. And by the way, I worked as a janitor one summer at in the building, at the New England Conservatory, NEC, Jordan Hall. Oh, I was a terrible janitor. I was an even worse janitor at that time than I was a cellist. So I needed to make some money one summer. And since Bill's name is still on the screen, it was after the summer when I finished at Brandeis. One of the professors at Brandeis went to this Cummington School of the Arts. They had a cellist lined up. The person couldn't come. And lo and behold, his name was Joel Spiegelman. He invited me. And, oh my God, I'm going to pretend to be a cello player. And so I went, and that changed my life. I spent a summer, Sonia Monosov. I have to mention Sonia Monosov. The first time, by the way, I never played in an orchestra till I was 22. I didn't do any chamber music, nothing. So at the Cummington School of the Arts, I was put in a string quartet playing the Mozart A major quartet with Sonia Monosov. Sonia Monosov was a wonderful violinist, taught, I think, for many years at Cornell. And Sonia was another one of these people. And we worked on the quartet the whole summer. And then I went to Harvard. I dropped out after less than a semester. The people in the graduate school office said they had never seen anybody happier to drop out. Because then Mr. Kapuscinski had gotten me a scholarship at NEC, and I moved across town, was living in Somerville, I lived in a rented room down the street from where the Boston Strangler had recently had one of his victims. It was kind of a grisly neighborhood at that time. Are there no more questions? Anybody want to ask me a question? Come on, here I am, eager to answer questions. Yes, so the conservatory was a very small school then. They had some very good teachers. Joseph Silverstein was there, of course. But it was a completely different institution from the one it is now. And I actually subbed for Colin Carr for a year at NEC and had the pleasure of also teaching there. It doesn't seem like anybody wants to ask any questions. Well, I guess I'll have to go on talking. What else would I like to say? Okay, there are some things. For some reason in English, we talk about up bow and down bow. Well, I mean, it makes no sense at all. In French, they say tirer and pousser. And the sense of pulling against the resistance in the string and pushing against the resistance in the string instead of pressing, instead of grabbing. When I have my wits about me, I think pull and push. Pull and push. Now, okay, let's see. There we go. Teaching is an integral part of a musician's career. How did you begin and develop your pedagogical skills, and how have they evolved over time? Well, everybody starts teaching at a certain point, and when you start teaching, you share what you're learning yourself. So, but my teaching career, well, I did not have my first teaching job until after I had, after I'd studied with Mr. Starker, after I left the Cleveland Orchestra. Richard Kapuscinski invited me to sub for him at Oberlin. I've actually subbed for many people when they took sabbaticals. Well, then mostly what I offered was the basic things that I've talked about that I learned from Mr. Starker and Mr. Virizlay. And I had already, yes, I had already gone and studied with Gregor Piatigorsky. How has it evolved? Well, I've taught hundreds of people by now. And what happens is you have a better sense when you've been around so many people and you meet them. You get a sense, well, what can I offer them that they might be interested in or might be open to? Because not everybody, yeah, I mean, the best teaching I've done, the happiest, was when I felt I can offer everything I have to the person. Then afterwards they can say, this part I learned from Michael Haber, I don't want it, it's not useful. This part was useful. But every student was different that way. Some people wanted really to dive into everything I suggested. I'm ashamed to tell you, did I ever have a student who did scales in thirds, sixths, and octaves, arpeggios, scales, trill exercises, shifting exercises, bowing exercises, etudes every day? If there is such a person, give me a phone call. Give me a call or an email, okay? So I'm an example of somebody who learned to play very late and who didn't have a gift for the instrument, which means I learned everything. If you're very gifted for something, you don't even know how you're doing it. And by the way, Mr. Starker, who was a child prodigy, sometime in his 20s, he said, wait, I need to figure out what I'm doing. Well, that's what he offered me. So I taught, I offered everything that I knew how to do. And as the years went by, did I become a better teacher? Well, the thing is, playing the cello is a traditional art. At least playing classical music on the cello is a traditional art. So I always offered, I did do a lot of things, playing in orchestras, string quartets. I didn't mention I played in a Composers String Quartet, played all of Elliott Carter's quartets. They were hard, by the way. And I offered, as you get older and you do more and more things, you have more to offer. So my teaching has evolved as I've gotten older and taught more, but I've always offered basically the same things because I felt they worked. Let's see. In what ways? How do you help students working on a contemporary, obscure piece of music? Where do you start? How do you approach it? If you've kind of any of your background. Well, that's a very good question. It depends on what the piece is. If it's a piece of chamber music, then you can get together with the other people and start playing it and try to make sense of it, study the score. If it's an unaccompanied piece for cello, well, then again, you start working on it and you try to discover what is its logic. What does it have to offer? Do I like it? Do I like it? You have to commit yourself when you learn a piece of music. But basically, what I've done, oh boy, did I ever struggle with the Elliott Carter String Quartet? First, I had to learn to play the notes, which was close to impossible. Other pieces, of course, where there are recordings, it helps. But basically, you begin to work. And if you have colleagues as a quartet or trio, you get together. And you start putting it together. You talk about it. You see, what does this sound like? Can we make sense of it? Can we commit to this piece? Did I answer your question well? I hope so. Where you start by practicing it, by playing it, by rehearsing it. And then as time goes by, you start hearing it better. You can hear more into it, hear more of what's going on. I played this group, I said, the Composers Quartet that was in residence at Columbia University. We specialized in playing new music. And actually, we got stacks of music from composers that they wanted us to learn. We couldn't learn all of it. But what we did was we began working on things. And actually, it's terrible. We had these stacks and we started playing a piece together, the four of us. And if we didn't care for it, we went on to the next one because we couldn't commit to working for several months on something that we didn't particularly like. I hope that was helpful. What is your process of preparation? Michael, I've never been to an international competition. I was not that kind of cellist. I was never going to be that kind of cellist. The other question I know a lot about. I wrote my own excerpt book, which you probably can find scattered all over the United States. I gave it out for free. The excerpts have to be played on the same level, the same high level, as your concerto, or if an orchestra asks for a Bach suite. There's no difference. I told this anecdote the last time I was friendly with Steve Gaber, who was a wonderful principal cellist of the Cleveland Orchestra. I mean, it's long after I had quit, because I was living nearby here in Akron. I ran into Steve. He said, I said they had auditions and hired nobody. I said, Steve, what happened? He said, we heard tons of good concertos and not one good Beethoven Fifth Symphony. Now, the thing about taking auditions, you don't know who you're playing for. You don't know what their tastes are. You're completely in their hands. There's some things that are absolutely necessary. First of all, you have to be able to play all the repertoire that's on the list. It's not wise to go to an audition and there's something you just can't play or you didn't learn. You have to play well in tune. Your sense of rhythm has to be solid. The bow strokes, short, long, legato, spiccato, all these things. There are excerpts like the Mendelssohn Midsummer's Dream or Bartlett Bride Overture. You have to have a control of short bow strokes. If you don't, and they give you an excerpt like that, you're going to be in trouble. But preparation, everything I've done in my life, I've prepared the same way, with patience, with attention, slowly, and working my way up and trying to get to the level that I felt they needed to be at. I prepared many, many people for orchestra auditions. We worked on those little excerpts like a sonata, like a concerto. They are music. They have to be played like they are music. And obviously, knowing the role that that excerpt plays in whatever piece it comes from is very, very important. Any committee, any conductor can tell immediately if you're playing something, you have no idea how it fits into the piece. I hope that was helpful. In what ways does playing professionally in a professional orchestra affect the way you play and practice individually? Well, I'm going to give you an honest answer. I played in a great orchestra. It was a Cleveland Orchestra with George Szell. And I want to say it was a great honor. I was astonished when I got in. It was the first audition I ever went to. And there were wonderful, wonderful things about it. I realized that it was the wrong kind of work for me. And it wasn't because I had a big ego and I thought I was too good for it. It's just that I wanted to have more independence. I wanted to teach, to play chamber music, that kind of thing. It does affect, okay. If you go on practicing seriously while you're in the orchestra, it doesn't have to affect your playing. The 2 years I was in the Cleveland Orchestra, I gave 2 recitals each year. I went right on. But I knew that if I wanted to make my playing more convincing, when I played by myself, or even that I needed to study more. So it was the wrong kind of work for me. It was a great honor. But I got out of there, I'll tell you a joke. So the Cleveland Orchestra kept hiring me to go on tours. They liked me, I'm happy to say. People got sick, they hired me. Well, one day we were on a tour of Europe, it was winter, and I got sick. I fainted in my hotel room. I missed the concert. The next day I came, and the other 11 cellists all gathered around me and said, Mike, this section sounded so much better when you weren't here. Well, it was a joke. I did want to have some kind of, listen, if I got sick for a cello lesson, that affected the student. When I fainted in my hotel room in Bern, Switzerland, it made no difference whatsoever to the way the orchestra sounded. So it affects your playing because in the orchestra I played in, if you heard yourself, you were playing too loud. The Cleveland Orchestra was a very disciplined chamber music-like ensemble. You were always supposed to be listening. Sometimes George Szell, if we were playing too loud, he would point his finger at another part of the orchestra that we should have been paying attention to. So I did need to get out of an orchestra, but the answer is, if you go on practicing, I know plenty of cellists who have played in orchestras their entire lives. They sound great. They go on giving recitals, they go on playing chamber music. It does not have to have a bad effect. It was just the wrong kind of work for me. As cellists, we don't have much classical repertoire. How can we have an elegant and fine sound in the few works we have, like in the sonatas of Boccherini? That kind of style asks for a much lighter, sweeter kind of playing. A lot of the playing that is being done nowadays focuses on the big, rich sound. And to play that music, in my opinion, everything I've said in this chat, it's just my opinion. You know, that's all. You know, maybe there's something helpful, maybe there isn't, but I'm just saying what I think. I love the Rococo, I've played both Haydn concertos, I played a Leonardo Leo concerto, Johann Christian Bach concerto. Well, I did not play it the same style. I played the Dvorak concerto or the Lalo concerto or the Brahms F major. I used a much lighter style, a freer bow, a more refined vibrato, rather a narrow one rather than a wider one. I adjusted my style to it. Did I elegant? Yes. Well, actually, you know, I'm not prepared to perform for you today, obviously, but my whole life I've longed to play in an elegant and refined and pure style. Purity of playing, discipline of playing was something Mr. Starker emphasized enormously in his teaching and the way he spoke about music. So the thing, you simply need to play lighter, not try to play loud. And, you know, I do have to say, developing a lot of facility all over the fingerboard, doing thirds, sixths, and octaves, arpeggios, trill exercises, all the stuff I've done every day my entire life. I still kind of do it a little bit. Those kinds of things, when you get into pieces where you have to play high and play lightly and elegantly, you know, if the technical preparation is a big part of it. Then your sensitivity to how you want to sound is the other part, and you just play more lightly and more elegantly. Let's see. Any tips on playing the sixth? Okay, sixth and okay. How do you play sixths and thirds and two? Well, thirds and sixths are not perfect intervals. You know, fifths and octaves and fourths are. So there are differences. I prefer. That's out of tune. That's out of tune. Now, I'm playing the B, the overtone series of the string. I prefer things that way. So, sorry. That it's not, I prefer those intervals to be as consonant as possible. The problem with your question is when you're playing harmonies in a string quartet or in a sonata, you know, those intervals may be spaced differently depending on the harmony that you're playing and depending on their melodic role. So, I don't know, did I answer your question? Well, yeah, I practice them every day. Yunut. Sorry if I didn't say your name right. You know, every day I do thirds, sixths, and octaves. You didn't mention octaves. Practice them. Listen to them. Find a way of playing them that makes your ears happy. I don't know if that was helpful, but I have to tell you, I still do thirds, sixths, and octaves every single day. It is the key. Why? Because the hand finds itself in third position, sixth position, octave position all the time. Sixths like this, thirds like that. So if you master them, it helps your intonation all the way through it helps your command of the entire instrument. I hope that was helpful. If it isn't, let me know. How about learning to breathe properly when playing, instead of inadvertently holding your breath? Well, you know what, Flora? This is, oh my God, Mark Lekas. Hi, Mark. Okay. Becoming tense and intense when we play. It's something all of us struggle with. You can hear recordings of poor Pablo Casals when he was older, where he moans and groans and has lost control of his breathing. Well, he didn't do that when he was young. The thing is, if you learn to play the instrument along the lines that Mr. Starker taught, by the way, Mr. Starker is not the only one who offers this kind of teaching. I don't mean to say that nobody else offers it. It's probably quite common. If your playing is based on sitting properly, on not tightening your shoulders and your chest, on moving freely, on mastering the art of switching tension and relaxation all the time, then probably, but I mean, this has to, probably your breathing is not going to be affected. I want to tell you, I work on this every day. I'm going to be 79 in a few days. If you think that I learned this, all those, and oh, now I can just do it, you're completely wrong. I have to look for it every single day because it's easy to lose it in the process of, trying to play expressively or with excitement, and then suddenly you're tight and you're out of control of what you're doing. I hope that's it. My feeling is the answer to your question is if your playing is based on freedom of motion and an understanding of how you use your muscle groups. In other words, so that they're not always all tense, but they're alternating tension and relaxation, probably your breathing is not going to be affected and you'll breathe more or less normally. That has been my experience. Mark. Oh, Mark Lekis. Oh, what a wonderful cellist. Oh my goodness, I was so impressed with you. You gave a performance of the fantasy pieces of Schumann. Yeah, that's right. It was amazing. I never forgot it. It was so good. Hi, Mark. Okay, here we go. Ruth, I have a hard time keeping my pinky finger curved. Which pinky? You mean you? You must mean this one. Well, you know what? It doesn't have to be perfectly curved. I have a deformed pinky. Perhaps you can see it. I don't know if you can see it. It's not. This is a normal one. This is mine. But you know what? I did finger exercises. I did all the stuff I've been talking about, and so look, my fourth finger is actually not curved, but I'm pressing down the string. I can vibrate beautifully on it. So without being together with you, I don't know how important that is. No, look, I have this is what my fourth finger looks like. Maybe everybody's hands are different. And maybe some people have hands where everything looks perfectly curved. Mine doesn't. Unless unless you hear that it creates problems in your playing, I wouldn't worry about it. Did you know any of my teachers, Irving Klein, Marion Davies? Well, Steve Cates. Oh my God. Well, I know Larry. I don't know Irving and Marion. Steve Cates was an amazing cellist and a wonderful guy. He died many years ago. We were born the same year. Steve Cates, I went twice to Carnegie Hall, once to hear him play Klaus Adams' cello concerto, and another time to hear him play Shlomo, both with the National Youth Symphony, or National Symphony, whatever it was called. He was a master of the cello, a beautiful sounding cellist. He had no trouble playing the cello whatsoever. I liked and admired him. Larry Lesser, I know less well, but I'm a fan of his. And not only was he a great cellist, or is he a great cellist, he ran the New England Conservatory. He's a man of many gifts and an extraordinarily bright guy, too. He majored in mathematics at Harvard. So, okay. Question from Paul Katz. Thanks for another energetic and informative chat. For us old guys, it was a nice trip down memory lane. It was inspirational to know how everyone struggles. Not just you, and you are much too modest, but even Piatigorsky. How about George Szell? And it was terrifying, but he's a great musician. How did George Szell influence me? I can answer the question. The aspiration, the dream in the Cleveland Orchestra, which Szell established, was to do something masterful and beautiful. There was an atmosphere of utmost seriousness and striving. There was no bad behavior in that. It was unheard of. There were orchestras where people behaving unheard of. Everybody was united through Szell's integrity and his dream of playing whatever he conducted and doing justice to it. Well, listen, that made an enormous impression on me. I mean, actually, Paul, thank you. It influenced the rest of my life because I too, in my own little way, I've wanted the same thing, to play on a high level, to understand what I was doing, what I was doing, to understand the music, to do justice to it, to do justice to the composers. That's what I felt by the 1 year. Szell died a year after I came, but he was an image of integrity in relation to music. There was no sentimentality, there was no fooling around, there was no posturing, there was no waving the baton around, and the orchestra that he created, it was difficult. I actually, since you're asking, I remember if I heard myself, I was playing too loud. It was physically, it was not easy, because the idea is always, there are 12 cellos, and the hall, it has to sound like one beautiful big cello. And the way we did it was by paying attention to each other and listening. And when we didn't, Szell had very thick glasses. Every time he turned his head to the right, I'd never played in an orchestra. Every time George Szell turned his right, I thought he was his head to the right. I thought he was going to fire me. Haber, out! That didn't happen, fortunately. But yes, he represented a kind of fierce integrity in everything he did that it influenced me very, very deeply. Thank you for asking. Okay, Christian, did you know Zara Nelsova? My teacher was a student of hers. Oh, Zara Nelsova. Oh, I heard Zara Nelsova play. Oh boy, she was unbelievable. Oh, by the way, on this subject, I admired all the great cellists. There's so many of them. First there was Casals and Feuermann and Rostropovich and Fournier and Navarra and Gendron and Tortelier and Jacqueline Dupre and Antonio Negro. Leonard Rose was fantastic. Mr. Piatigorsky, Mr. Starker. I'm sure I've left a few out, and now there's a whole new crop of great cellists. But Zara Nelsova was, she was a powerhouse. And I did not, well, actually, once she did come here, I took her shopping. She came and played a concerto, and I took her to, we had a very nice market here at one point in Akron. I took her shopping. But no, I admired her enormously. She was absolutely one of the greats. Okay. Hello from Bolivia, and thank you for sharing with us. Which warm-up exercises would you suggest? Well, I'll tell you what I do. I start with open string exercises. Fritz Mogg has a book called Cello Exercises, has very good ones. Then I do scales, third, sixth octaves. I do some trill exercises. I do some shifting exercises. I may do an etude. But when I taught, what I told the people who studied me with was, if you work on everything a little bit every day, then you have a step in advance of meeting that problem in a piece. For example, if you don't practice octaves every day, which by the way I have, and you run into a passage in octaves in the piece, you can't play it. So what I do, and by the way, I do it lightly and quietly, but I touch on everything. And then I reassure myself, yes, my basic, trill exercises also. I reassure myself that basically the skills that I've worked, I worked a lifetime for this, happily, that, yeah, I still have the skills. I can still do it. And if I have to ramp up to meet a particular challenge in a particular piece, the basic skill is still there. So that, I realize other people have different kinds of exercises, and that is just what I do. I have trouble with having a steady, wide vibrato. I'm always tense. Well, the thing is, I think the exercise I suggested before would help. When I started out, I couldn't vibrate. Why? Because my arm was so tight. So then I showed you earlier in the program, Mr. Starker had me do this, and then root my second finger, let this flesh deep in the string and keep the motion going. Well, once I got the motion, then sometimes I put a metronome on. Click, 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 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Okay, but the thing is, for a wider vibrato, you have to make a bigger motion. And, then the amplitude, the width of the vibrato motion, if you, well, that's obviously too tight. Look how big the motion is. if you know, so the thing is, the key thing to understand, the motion comes from the arm. And in half position, it's the entire arm. I'm kind of rotating. Here is the forearm, and here it's entirely the forearm. I hope that was helpful. I had the opposite problem. I couldn't vibrate at all. So I had to work up from very slow and finally, I remember one day I came into a cello lesson. Mr. Starker said to me, "You broke the sound barrier." Because I don't know what I sounded like before, but suddenly I had a warm and rich vibrato, but that's how I worked on it. I think that marks the end of the questions. If you will give closing remarks, and I will let you know once the live broadcast is over. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I had a great time. There are a few other things I would have enjoyed talking about, but I hope I answered the questions adequately. Thank you very much for watching, and I will look forward to giving another one of these chats someday. Anyway, thank you and good evening.